Welcome to Trends in AI for October by Zeta Alpha. My name is Jakub Zavrel, founder of the company, and as always, with my co-host.
Hi everyone, my name is Dinos. I'm an AI researcher at Alpha and the co-host of the Trends in AI webinar. So yes, we're back this month. Pretty short time between the last episode as well, and we have a very special topic today. So what are we going to talk about?
We think that it's really time to talk about safety, especially in deploying AI in the enterprise. And for that, we have a co-panelist, Marta Stolk from Deploy, who is plugging in any second now. So let's hope he shows us. And let's dive in.
Yeah, so the topic is enterprise AI safety. We're going to talk a bit about how can AI be safely deployed. So safety is quite a loaded term in terms of AI, but we're focusing specifically on how to make AI applications safe and secure to use
inside companies.
And we're gonna sprinkle a bit of our traditional news, funding models, and all the regular that people love from the show.
Research papers, slightly biased also towards safety topics and gossip, of course, as always. Yesterday, everybody in AI should stop what they're doing and take some reading time because yesterday Nathan Benaik and the Air Street Capital crew dropped their yearly State of AI report. How many slides was it this time?
300 something?
350 slides. So this is the definitive yearly roundup of the state of AI in research, industry, funding, geopolitics, security. So we won't do it a lot of justice by summarizing it in one sentence, but we did with Zeta Alpha contribute to a couple of things. The chapter on AI agents, but also our regular measurement of compute in research papers. And what we see is that NVIDIA's large leads persists within research papers. But you see it's kind of leveling off a little bit. So that leads us to our first news item. Big news this week, the AMD OpenAI deal, right?
Yeah, it's quite a weird deal. Lots of terms and conditions attached.
And it was specified not in number of dollars or number of actual GPU units. It was specified in the number of gigawatts. Mm-hmm. So the deal is that OpenAI commits. I think it commits, right? But we don't know what the exact terms are to buy 6 gigawatts of OpenAI compute. So if you kind of do very quick napkin math, 6 gigawatts, that's maybe GPU is about 1 kilowatt. So that's about 6 million GPUs. Well, if you calculate that one of them costs maybe 10, 20K, that's a very large number. It's been estimated that maybe to really build this into a data center is about $50 billion per gigawatt. So it would represent another commitment of a couple of $100 billion of OpenAI to a chip maker, but this time AMD was the underdog. So this really puts AMD firmly on the map. What is noteworthy about this deal is that there's this kind of weird strings attached. So OpenAI is actually allowed to buy AMD stock for a ridiculously low price, which would seem like it costs AMD about $32 billion. But then on announcing this deal, the shares actually went up by 34%. So I think they kind of already, so this is also noteworthy that this GPU, which is referenced in this deal, the MI 450, does not actually on the market yet. Mm-hmm. So it will come out next year. So there's a lot of question marks here. And for me, it's one of these deals which we have seen a lot of with Oracle and NVIDIA, where it's kind of circular, right?
Yeah,
So-
money leaves NVIDIA, goes to OpenAI, goes to AMD, goes back to OpenAI,
Yeah.
goes to
So some memes on social media that actually where it's like the Three Stooges and Nvidia is giving their dollars to AMD, which is a bit weird, but okay. So the other I think big topic in the State of AI report is that the level of enterprise adoption is really is really very high. Initially, we said like accelerating, but if you look very closely at the charts here, you actually see that it's kind of stabilizing, but at a pretty high value already. So this was one of our motivations to really want to talk about enterprise safety, because if a majority of companies are actually deploying AI inside business critical processes, security becomes a topic you have to talk about.
Oh, and also Martin has just joined us online.
As a panelist?
Yep.
Fantastic. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Bob.
So, I think that's also shown in the kind of concerns that companies have, right? So what is in all of these figures here?
Yeah, so on the left, we can see kind of a categorization of these executives that do want to deploy AI solutions. What are the main challenges and concerns that they have about their application? And if we check here, out of the top 5, 3 of them are related to compliance, security. So yeah, we see here, for example, the cybersecurity aspect of having an AI app in your infrastructure. We also have regulatory compliance, which we'll dive deeper a lot later. And yeah, we have kind of the privacy from the user's perspective. So does the data on the platform actually not leak to other users through AI responses and AI functionality? And yeah, on the right, there is another survey that shows the top challenges by far is compliance, and then comes cost. So it's often people might be thinking that they're complementary, but a lot of the time compliance comes first, and then all the others can get a green or red light.
So one of the, in my view, sort of biggest red flags in enterprise AI safety is kind of summarized under the term shadow AI or shadow IT with respect to AI. And what you see is that basically, and this is data from the same MIT State of AI in Business report that we discussed on last month's episode. One of the details from that report is that actually the number of employees who report to use large language models regularly for their work is about 90%, whereas the number of companies who have purchased subscriptions on an enterprise level for these services is about 40%, which is, I think, also the 40% that you saw in the graph in the State of AI report. So basically, about 50% of the employees are using their private subscriptions to ChatGPT, Claude, coding agents, vibe coding, image and video generators as part of their daily work. What we see is also that a majority of these users are actually non-technical people. So also likely to, to just help them with a day-to-day task in productivity, writing a piece of text, summarizing something, brainstorming an idea. And all of this is completely outside of the formal IT governance. Actually, they're also hiding it from their employers. So in this little graph on the left-hand side of the screen, you see that, people know that this is not going to be perceived positively or suspect, and that therefore they do this in secret. And I think this is, of course, a big risk, not only in terms of potential security leaks, but also more and more in coding agents that people use, right? You also see that a lot of people in IT related jobs are using coding agents. Are you using that?
Yes,
Is
but
it supported by your company?
thankfully it is.
Yeah, great. But not in every company that's the case. Developers still kind of use these agents, and that, of course, has a risk of exposing the entire code base of the company to
Yeah, and
external service, some external services, right?
I think also some very popular types of media to give to the LLMs are emails or spreadsheets, which can have a lot of confidential information as well.
Absolutely. So basically, the huge risks associated with shadow AI are unmonitored security exposures, data leaks. We also see that people are using these personal subscriptions through public Wi-Fi networks, personal devices, things that are surely not compliant with the corporate IT policy. There's a risk of all kinds of social engineering scams through maybe unknown apps. Coding assistants can create unknown vulnerabilities. And also, the answers that people get from these personal subscriptions on company related questions are, of course, not always correct because they're not connected to internal information. So, all of this can lead to the syndrome. ChatGPT said that this was the right thing to do, but the internal document that was relevant was not found. How do we know all of this? Well, we asked Zeta Alpha, and it created a deep research report on this topic, which we are happy to share with you if you're interested. So let's turn to the topic of regulation and compliance. So now we really do have to get Martin in the show. Yeah, maybe it's good if you briefly introduce yourself and your company.
Yeah, my name is Martin Stork. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Deploy. What we saw a few years ago, and I think there's an increasing problem, is that on the one side, organizations use more and more AI, self-built, homegrown AI machine learning, but also procured and external vendors, procured AI and external vendors. On the one side, and on the other side, you see more and more risk, compliance, and risks accompanied with AI, and also the realization that our risk is becoming one of the biggest risks in organizations. So we started building AI governance software 5 years ago, which is now being used across Europe. I think Europe is not always ahead, but now I think they are ahead in terms of AI GRC. So we do focus on that for the past 5 years, with in the end the aim to make sure that we use more AI in the high risk settings. Let's say healthcare, public organizations, financials, or software providers to one of those industries. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Do you recognize this characterization of the shadow AI problem?
It's funny. The term shadow AI popped up quite a lot over the past few months, I believe. What we see a lot now is that most organizations at least appoint someone for being responsible for AI, and then he or she is starting to look into where AI is being used, procured, built, and then they find out there's actually way more usage of AI than what most people realize. So most people have in scope everything that is built internally, but have no clue which tools are using AI embedded in the total software stack, or what people are using and building on their personal accounts, which slowly become agents by themselves. So yeah, definitely. Had really a lot of conversation on that over the past few months.
So obviously, in terms of general sort of IT compliance and security, there are standards, and what we see is that there is a lot of appetite to regulate. We have the European AI Act. We have various other parts of the world and regions which regulate AI in their own way. But it's only kind of partially related to this topic of governance of AI in companies, right? And what we have seen is that there is an emerging kind of standard. And I mean, it's not widely adopted yet, but more and more we're seeing ISO 42001 emerge as a kind of discussion concept of how to actually govern AI in companies. So what we know is that it's an ISO standard, kind of similar to ISO 27001, which governs information security, and it's rising to prominence. But you know more about it. So tell us all about ISO 42000.
Well, I'm not going to tell everything because you told me I can only spend 5 minutes on it. But it's good to realize I've got a few different components, and it goes a bit top down in that sense, similar to 27001. So what you see is that indeed the AI Act and other regulations, especially the one, for example, in California, follow quite the same logic, which means that from the top level, you do need to define an AI management system, an AIMS, which includes certain processes, policies, structure, but also the governance and the roles and responsibilities of people. So basically defining on a high level how you want to deal with AI. And within that, you define different risks for different use cases. So if you go one level deeper, you define different use cases, and those use cases are having a certain risk classification, which is quite similar to what is in the AI Act. And then along the life cycle, you will probably add more controls. So if something is in ideation phase, you do want to have the ethical considerations. But when you progress along the life cycle, you also want to add more controls like monitoring, human oversight, some way of transparency, incident response management. So those kind of things you will add along the life cycle. Basically making sure that it's also integrated in the tech stack where also AI systems live. I probably can't go to the next slide, so I'm relying on you here. So the first step is basically defining those essential roles, policies, and templates. And I would really advise you to do it in the MVP version. So what I've seen in practice a lot is that companies are working with AI, and it's good. They're building something. They are also buying stuff from external vendors, and that's all fine. And along the way, you should also start defining those policies, risk assessments, documentation templates, and a way of doing incident response. But along the way, you will learn how to optimize that. So just like any development process, I would advise you to also see an AIMS as an MVP thing, which you can iterate on later on. Please don't spend years on defining this. We have 6 more steps. So the second one is translating that in a control framework as well. That basically means that you have, for example, defined that you want to do some data governance steps or risk classification or bias and data controls or well, whatever you define in the policy should also come back in a control framework on a use case level. So here you see some print screens how we do that in our platform. The third step is making sure that you have complete overview of your use cases. And yeah, we discussed it a bit already. There's so much shadow AI being used in organizations. So it's super important that you have a registry of different AI use cases. And please don't build that in Excel because it's outdated by the moment you got it. So it's really important that you got that, and preferably you got that into a system which is integrated into your tech stack. That is not only a list of use cases, but for example, integrated with your Git repository, it's integrated with the inference of those AI systems, because then you can track the input and the output of systems. And so the further you get into the integration, the better. And then describe what it does, the risk level, and also the policies or regulations that are involved. And then the fourth step is making sure that you got everything documented. So that includes documentation, model cards, data cards, but also certain assessments which you define together. Think about a data protection impact assessment or fundamental right impact assessment, and that you together sign off on those things. So what we normally see is that second line defines the control framework, defines the way of working. The first line, people that work with AI, the people that buy AI or build AI, those are the ones that are actually working on the use cases themselves. So they will make sure that those assessments are filled in. either automated or by themselves. At least they are responsible for that. And the second line is going to audit audit those assessments and documentation steps. And then the fifth step, and I think that's where the fun really starts. AI is super dynamic, and you can't oversee all the dynamics. So it's super important that you trace and log everything you're doing. That holds for versions of AI systems, but also for the predictions, the input, the output, the traceability of LLMs, for example, but also with predictive AI. Thinking about fraud detection, for example, you do want to know what was sent to the model, but also what came out of the model, how in the end the human being was evaluating that, and what feedback they gave on it. That brings us to the sixth step, which is human oversight. So if you see that models are slowly performing worse than before, you want to act on it. So you do want to make sure that you have all the controls in place to act quickly when you see the performance is dropping or that models or AI systems are drifting from reality. So those kind of things are also defined in the annexes of the ISO 42001. So the way ISO 42001 works, you basically got a description of every step you need to do in the AIMS, and then step 1 to, in the end there's a 7th step I think as well. 1 to 7 are described in the annexes. And the last one, and I really want to emphasize this, is the most important one, I believe. We human beings are super, super smart. And we can steer AI in the right direction. We are way smarter than AI systems will ever be. So whenever a model is giving an output, it's super important that you add some way of explainability to it. Because with that, we as human beings understand how models and AI systems make decisions. We can give feedback, and the feedback can help to improve AI systems and to act quickly when we see things are going wrong, which could be bias, underperformance, or anything else. So those 7 steps really help to stay in control and comply to the ISO 42001 certification.
And there are, of course, a lot of vendors of ISO, other ISO certification solutions, right? That kind of allow you to do AI management. But you kind of argue that it's much closer to ML ops than to just tracking documentation, right?
Yeah, so you see here in the slide with Venta, and Venta's paper reality. It's like driving a car and having no dashboard, but just like a really big manual next to the driver's seat. Yeah, no way you're going to read that thing the whole day. So this is what we built with Deploy. Basically, you have to do all the documentations indeed of both on a high level, the AIMS, but also on a model or a system level, having all the monitoring and transparency in place, and then really integrate it with the tech stack. This is how you really keep control, and this is how you really drive a car with a proper dashboard and with alerts when things go wrong, accompanied with the proper documentation. So that's why we are building this, and hopefully, I'm also European. Hopefully, we can make sure that in Europe or even the rest of the world, we can use more AI on the places where it really matters in healthcare, at governments, in financial institutions, because we need to.
Yeah. And so maybe a bit of a difficult question. How does this help combat shadow AI?
Yeah, if you go back to the AI registry, which was step 2, I believe. Anyway, it's super important that you have full scope and overview of everything you do with AI. So Deploy is not just an MLOps platform, so it's really the umbrella of any AI system. And I really believe you should have any AI system in scope and make sure that you monitor them, that you document, that you do the assessment on all those AI tools to the extent possible, of course. So if you use a note taker, might be harder to really monitor what's happening, but at least you should do vendor assessments and those kind of things. So I think having the full overview is the first step. And what we normally see with our customers is that they have, again, that first line and second line. So second line is defining what you should do with any AI system. But it's first line responsibility to make sure that they at least register all those AI systems. If they don't, their responsibility. If things go wrong, their responsibility.
And what do you see in the market, not only around your own customers? Obviously, you have traction in a lot of more regulated industries, right? So what do you see in sort of broader market? We're seeing, let's say, maybe 40% of enterprises have adopted AI projects with vendors, maybe 90% see some level of internal usage through private accounts. What is the percentage that you would estimate where companies are kind of ready for having an AIMS and maybe going towards ISO 42000 certification?
A good question. Is hard to estimate the percentage, I think. But what I do see a lot is that on the one side, indeed, a lot of organizations are really using a lot of AI, way more than they often understand or realize. And having at least an MVP version of an AIMS can be super, super helpful for them. It doesn't have to be super complex, but at least knowing which AI models and systems are being used is super helpful. A lot of organizations I talk to, for example, they don't realize they have an ATS, an applicant tracking system, with AI, which are analyzing CVs, which is a higher risk use case. So not even having that in scope can be super tricky and can leave you in a lot of trouble if applicants are complaining that they are auto rejected based on the CV screen. So I would really advise companies, everyone I'm talking to have some version of like a basic AI in place, because the risks are real.
Right. Thanks, Martin, for sharing your expertise and your recommendations with us. So a little bit more on the academic side, we have a recent paper. I don't know if you've seen it. Because a lot of these AI regulations are, of course, very regional, right? They're very different in different countries, different jurisdictions. I think in the US, there is still some kind of situation where every state regulates for themselves. And we found this an interesting paper, Unified Control Framework, which maps out a kind of, let's say, universal ontology of both risks and controls, and provides a framework to map them. It's a little bit more on the academic research side, but they have this very nice environment where you can actually play out with this mapping and with translation to your own regional requirements. So Unified Control Framework by Eisenberg et al. From Credo AI. And that kind of brings us to one very important recent regional regulation, which is the California AI regulation, known under the abbreviation SB 53. So I think last year around this time we saw SB 1047, a piece of very ambitious California regulation that eventually didn't become law because of widespread opposition in the AI industry, both from open source people, startups, and big tech. So Gavin Newsom kind of scratched his ears and put some experts to work, and now 1 year later we have SB 53.
So how similar is it to the original?
Not at all. It's quite. It's a reasonable framework. So basically, it has transparency, disclosure, requirement to report risks to the government oversight. Actually, the risk have to be reported to the California Office of Emergency and Safety, which is kind of the guys who regulate floods, earthquakes, and other weather catastrophes. So I'm not sure how much AI expertise they already have, but it's a fairly broad set of packages, but it really kind of removed all the stuff that people were revolting against. So it doesn't actually require disclosure beyond risks of trading data and algorithms, and it doesn't require the much discussed kill switches. And if you kind of compare it, for example, to the European AI Act, it is altogether different in scope. Actually, the new California SB 53 only applies to the largest AI developers, so the ones that are really training frontier models of this 10 to the 26th flop compute level, whereas AI Act is one order of magnitude less. And it only requires this kind of reporting from very large companies that have more than $500 million in annual revenue, whereas the EU AI Act is applies to everybody. So it's a kind of watered down version. It does have some real penalties, like up to 10 million for repeat offenders. But that's also kind of a different thing than 6 to 7% of global turnover for big tech.
Yeah, I think we've seen recently some settlements that make this number seem very pale.
Right. If you look at how much Anthropic paid to settle the copyright case, they would consider this small change. So Marta, maybe as a closing note, so how do you see AI regulation developing in the US?
Ooh, nice topic. I had a discussion yesterday actually with a large organization which is both active in Europe and in the US. And well, even though we do a lot of things wrong in the EU, and we can talk about it for ages, I think we should be super happy with one regulatory framework instead of the patchwork we see in the US, where not even on state level, but even sometimes on municipality level, you see different regulations with completely different philosophies behind it. So, for example, New York is focusing a lot on ethics and bias, whereas California is pretty close to the AI Act in many ways. And you see it also here. It's the philosophy behind it, at least, quite similar to the EU AI Act and ISO 14001. And for the company we was talking about, which is, by the way, headquartered in the Netherlands, but active then across the world, for them it's super difficult to navigate it because you basically have to comply to, I think, 37 different regulatory frameworks in the US, simply because every state came up with something different. And this is exactly, by the way, the risk if you're going to postpone the AI Act. Italy will come up with something, France will come up with something, and it will all be different with all the geopolitics behind it. So, in this case, California is quite similar in many ways. But
well, the reason we highlighted California is because obviously a lot of the large players are based there, so this will affect them. So I think, the European single uniform regulation certainly has its advantages, although I've also seen a lot of complaints about it.
And I also find it quite ironic that the first releases never hit Europe, even though it's one regulation that you have to deal with, but all of a sudden it's available all over US.
There's a lot of complaints in the US about regulation as well. I think the difference is US deals with regulation and we sometimes complain about regulation. We should just deal with it. But there's a lot of complaints in the US about AI regulation as well.
Thanks. I know you have to go, so thanks for your contribution. So let's dive a little bit more into the technical aspects of secure and safe AI in enterprise. So we talked about shadow AI, but if you build your own, like what is sort of the number one technical requirements?
Well, I'm not sure if I would place this at number one, but for sure you need to have a layer and the infrastructure available so that you can deploy apps that have the required isolation. So usually in technical terms, this is called multi-tenancy. So you are able to set up multiple apps or an app with different groups of users that have complete logical separation on the database level or some other vertical. And also pretty popular that we also covered on the last episode is you need to have this notion of role-based access control, and which is propagated throughout all applications, including AI apps. So some users are able to see some resources based on who they are, which group they belong to, and these should be reflected, like we mentioned on the last episode, in the answers you get from the AI system, or even if you have access to some gated model or system. Another one that is very popular and not specifically bound to AI is audit logging. So you want to see when you change a model, when you change something in the platform that serves this model, someone has changed it, and it has to be visible, transparent, and always there, so people can look back and see, that's why the answers, like Martin mentioned. So this is why the answers changed now, So maybe we can need to roll back, or this is actually not the right approach. Because I think we've also seen this quite a lot, notoriously with Grok. One simple change to the prompt led to very bad behavior, which if you don't have the audit logging, you'll never find out until it's too late. And I think one final topic that's very close to the data foundation layer is about encryption. So obviously AI works better when you have data, but this data is very sensitive. So you also want to, even if it's in-house or if you have an external partner with that builds a system, you need to kind of agree what's the acceptable risk of where the data needs to be encrypted, when it's idle, when it's being transmitted, when it's also being used by the application. It's all these notions of data at rest or transit and all being encrypted correctly.
Which brings us, obviously, you have the data that you feed to the AI to train it or to do the context engineering. But that obviously also brings us to the models where you actually send that data, right?
Yeah, so the models themselves can be part of the infrastructure, but there are actually many ways where people might not have the infrastructure. So let's maybe start with a simpler case in terms of red tape, which is actually just rolling your own LLM infrastructure.
Not sending anything to any public service.
So
installing everything
fully
on-prem in
fully
your
owning
own,
it.
like air-gapped server in the basement, right?
Yeah, so here I kind of came up with 3 dimensions that people think about when choosing which approach to take. So obviously, as I first said, red tape, in terms of red tape and compliance and kind of your CISO going over your head, this is the best approach because you can fully control and know what's happening. You can easily make this machine or part of the infrastructure never touch the internet. But then come the other parameters that are also very important. So you first want the system to perform well. And although we are seeing local models getting better and better, for sure it's not at the bleeding edge where you have like the best capabilities on day one. And at least personally, I think performance alone, which you can get around by smart techniques, ease of use is a nightmare. So first you need to have compute, which is not cheap to have these models running.
And
you
scalable, right? In your basement, hard.
Yeah, you have to have concurrent users. You have to think of many aspects before you even get to a state where it's as simple as one line of calling an API provider, which is the next step, actually. So I have kind of split it here into kind of more in the wild providers like Together AI, Fireworks, Grok, which kind of offer their own benefits. Like some are very optimized for high throughput, others are very cheap or have a very wide selection of models off the shelf. But performance may vary. Obviously, you choose the model. But I think this is kind of the out of the 3 options we have here, red tape is the biggest concern. And how do you make sure that
it's hard to get like enterprise IT approval for sending your confidential data to a vendor like that, right?
Yeah. So obviously you can have a partner or you can dive deep and find someone, but this is a much longer process because there are many players that are not as established. And yeah, obviously, I think what people think of when they think of a language model is usually just pinging an API provider from a big lab like Anthropic, Google DeepMind, OpenAI, XAI, these guys who usually are certified like with SOC and ISO, but still, some people are skeptical about sending data there. So sometimes they prefer going through their cloud provider, or still they are there are many reasons to think that, I still don't want to give my data because you never know what happens if I just send it to OpenAI. But in terms of the other 2 dimensions, I think we can all agree that performance and ease of use is probably the best there.
So kind of the data residency and the origin of the models is a very big deal, right? Last month we reported on this big deal, the Mistral and ASML investment. There's a whole number of other big deals going on this month, more recently. One worth noting is in the US, Reflection AI, which is actually an open source model startup, raised $2 billion just very recently, and is supposed to be the US answer to both, let's say, DeepSeek open models and also something like Mistral, maybe. Just a few other noteworthy big deals. Elastic bought Gina AI. I think pretty interesting development in the search space. In the robotics space, SoftBank bought the robotics business of ABB for a lot of money. So let's see what that will bring. And in the sort of science and material discovery space, periodic labs got a whole bunch of rock star researchers from all the big tech labs together to work on materials discovery. And finally, in European news, the kind of agent automation platform, like low-code agent automation platform, N8N raised $180 million for expanding their business. So we talked about Mistral and ASML. This one really struck me in the eye in a very different way. So what is SAP doing in terms of one of our flagship European tech and software companies? What are they doing in terms of local LLMs or local European AI? Well, they just released this initiative called Sovereign Open AI for Germany. So what do you think of that?
I think it's quite a paradoxical term, but I guess if it is actually hosted in Europe, it still means that there is some level of autonomy that you can expect.
Yeah, it is actually hosted on servers that are owned by SAP in Europe, in Germany. But it actually Azure servers operated by, so it's a Microsoft infrastructure with OpenAI on top. Just somebody else holds the
Holding
keys
the key.
to it. Yeah. So I thought this was very ironic as a step in the week where Europe wants to, claim its digital and AI sovereignty back. It's kind of a Trojan horse, I think. So talking about OpenAI, something that couldn't have escaped anybody who keeps track of AI news was the OpenAI Dev Day, which was last Monday, right? So what did we see there?
Yes, I think what probably left the biggest impression on people is how they're trying to make ChatGPT this app platform. So they released the App SDK that allows you to build apps on top of ChatGPT with a lot of kind of open standards to support building new things.
Yeah, so we already had MCP, right? Mm-hmm. So you can include data sources and tools in through MCP. Authored by Anthropic. So now basically OpenAI is adding like a app UI layer to MCP, right? It's an extension of the MCP protocol where what they demoed, for example, here is Zillow. That's a real estate site, and you can basically like ask your ChatGPT to give you some information about houses in Pittsburgh, and then it will not only ask the query and deliver it back in the original sort of chat interface, it will actually launch a full-fledged Zillow UI that you can still control through the chat. I thought that was pretty cool. So you can actually ask ChatGPT to filter down on certain criteria, like here 3-bedroom homes, and it will actually control the app in the background to do that query. And the other big announcement, actually kind of rumored to be an N8N killer for low-code agent automation, was the Agent Kit, right?
Yeah, so this kind of is targeted to developers, but also non-technical people who want to build an agent with OpenAI's models kind of in a graphical format.
Yeah, so the product manager of the Agent Kit here is showing how you can kind of low-code click together these kind of building blocks. Reminds me of the programming language Scratch, but I don't know if that never became so very popular, right? Developers and low code, I think that's a bit of an odd combination, right?
I mean, it's also very popular in game development, but obviously you always have the option to dive deep and use code instead.
So in my view, it's kind of more aimed at business users who are already using ChatGPT, and they want to automate some things very easily, right? But kind of coming back to our topic of AI governance, now you have this sort of mess where thousands and thousands of your business users, if you have an enterprise ChatGPT subscriptions, are authoring these kind of very powerful agentic workflows. I don't know how that will be ISO 42000. Yeah, so just quickly summarizing all those announcements at the OpenAI RF Day. So there was the Apps SDK, the Agent Kit, which contains a lot of different components, both the agent builder, but also a embeddable, customizable chat UI called Chat Kit, guardrails, facilities, evals, and there was a lot of other stuff around codecs and Sora, but we don't have time to cover that now. So the obvious conclusion is like,
Where is this going?
Where is this going, right? Is OpenAI still a lab which is going towards AGI or super intelligence, or are they trying to do something else?
Yeah, I think they want to become the de facto platform where people interact with language models. So
I think it's beyond that. I think they want to become the de facto platform where people interact with anything, right? They basically want to own the user experience and become the operating system for your information.
I mean, it's been a long rumor that they also want to compete in the browser market. So why do you need a browser if you just need a website and then everything plugs there?
So I think with 800 million weekly users, they have quite a gambit to play. But if you look at kind of enterprise AI safety, I'm not sure they're there yet. One detail, if you connect these agents to your own applications, every single user needs to give their credentials individually to OpenAI. I don't think that's going to fly in the enterprise IT world. So talking about OpenAI and automating work in the enterprise, you notice this GDP eval.
Yeah, so I think it came very hand in hand with their latest releases, and it's more of an evals team study on how language models currently or in the future will be used to perform this kind of dream they have of performing meaningful work. And they gathered, so to not go into too much detail, they gathered a bunch of actual real-world tasks and categories, like the ones shown here on the screen, and they kind of benchmarked
from all kinds of different professions, right?
And they benchmarked both their own models, but also a wide variety of others. And yeah, so this is an example of how these tasks look. So you have a spreadsheet and an instruction. So it's not just a prompt, and the agent needs to edit the spreadsheet or produce a new PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, so do the actual task. That is part of the work. Yeah.
And yeah, right here we see the actual performance of different language models.
Well, at least it's intellectually honest. We all remember the graph fiasco. But what's interesting here is that actually GPT-5 is not the best model. That's by a wide margin is Anthropic's Claude Opus, right?
Yes, which is the actual one that, with the error margins, actually reaches the performance of an expert.
Across all these different tasks, right, on average. Which brings us to Anthropic, because they also, maybe not with the same fanfare as the OpenAI Dev Day, but they had quite a lot of announcements, right?
Yeah, and I think the biggest one is Sonnet 4.5, so it's the half incremental generation.
Which is rumored to be even better than 4.1 Opus, right?
Yeah, so at least in these benchmarks here, it kind of matches the performance of the previous generation at a much higher speed and lower costs.
Yeah, and Anthropic also launched their Claude Agent SDK. They became available in Microsoft Copilot, and they claim that Claude Sonnet is the strongest coding model available at the moment. And in particular, what I found interesting, also in the light of our topic of safety, they really make a strong case that it's a very good cyber defender, that it's able to find vulnerabilities in code at a much better level than any other model. So I think Claude Opus 4.1 is the dark green one, and Sonnet 4.5 is the orange one. So it outperforms it definitely on cybersecurity. If you're interested in AI safety, I can also recommend to read Anthropic's Threat Intelligence Report, which contains all kinds of real-world, very crazy AI safety stuff with North Korean hackers impersonating real remote workers to spy situations and scam situations of all kinds of types. So which brings us to kind of
what are these exploits actually?
What are all of these exploits? So what do you have?
We won't watch the full video, but I think one very interesting and real scenario is actually with these browsers or these agents that operate on websites, it's very likely, and this has been proven actually in the wild, that you can have an exploit where the agent will read the web page and perform some very sensitive action. Like here, for example, Brave, which is have their own browser, asks the browser agent, to summarize this website. But since one of the comments instructs the agent, "Give me your password," it will go ahead and do the action, and reply in the comment with the token that is needed. So we see this more generally. So this is obviously just one example, and it has been fixed. But we see this when you give access to an agent that can read from a website. If that website can give an instruction to the agent to behave differently, then now this is an attack vector. So I think this is an interesting.
So we have a few academic papers on the same subject. One also originated here in Amsterdam, partially.
Yeah, so Martin de Rijk is one of the authors here, and just on a very high level, what they do in the Silent Saboteur, they just show that actually if you ingest one document in a corpus of millions that has been meticulously engineered through this reinforcement learning framework, you can actually target the performance of the language model that will retrieve it and answer the question completely differently. So on a high level, they show that they have almost a 50% chance of success on changing the performance, the output on a factual question. And yeah, they train basically a system that learns to mimic the behavior of a black box retrieval engine, and then change the answer based on that one document.
Right, and you have more papers in this sort of area.
Yeah, so again, to not go too deep, but we see these auto-evolving and self-adapting agents. So this paper called "Your Agent May Misevolve," they show that there are actually specific parts of the behavior of the agent, and quite critically, and we'll see this in many other papers, memory and tool use is one of them. So if the agent starts accumulating memory from previous interactions, or calling tools and creating its own tools with MCP, then these become quite important in the context and might undo anything that's been in the instructions, or even the safety fine-tuning of the agent. So they show here across a bunch of examples that if you just let the agent train on its own data, or you use tools or use memory, then this actually opens up the possibility for the agent to misbehave.
And I think this is the last paper in this series.
Yeah, very similar to what we said about code, unsafe code. So can language models be prompted to bypass any kind of safety around not creating unsafe code? And they find here, most importantly, that if if a user is experienced and they can orchestrate a multi-file project about spyware or adware, then these agents, or that even normally respond with a refusal or just give me a prompt. Then if it's an actual code base that you invoke them in, then they will perform the task. So they have this benchmark that shows in this JOSM that 75% of the time you will get actual code, and 32% of the time it will do what it's asked to do, which is the
jailbreak. Basically.
It is to perform a bad action.
Yeah, that's quite worrying.
Yeah, so we see models even like GPT and so on.
But there's also countermeasures being launched.
Yeah, so
obviously Anthropic with their cybersecurity work, but also DeepMind, right?
Yeah, so DeepMind kind of previewed a system that they are trying out in many large open source repositories, and they're trying to find actively bugs with an AI system that scans through them.
Yeah, so this is actually going out without being asked and submitting patches or security.
Yeah, now they say that they still monitor the proposed patches, but the system is supposed to just actively scan big projects and fix them.
All right. So we're coming towards the end of our show, but one aspect which is kind of introduced often in the discussion as a kind of panacea is that you just need guardrails, right? So there's all these different AI risks, but if you keep your language model on the rails using some fences, it will be fine. So we just surveyed very quickly what are sort of the available frameworks. So there's obviously Azure, AWS, and also OpenAI. They have their sort of native cloud-based guardrails framework. They're kind of black boxes, right? You just call basically either before calling the language model or after calling the language model, either on the input or the output, you call it and it gives you some kind of score or whether that's safe. There's also a lot of open source, and one that's worth noting is NVIDIA's NeMo guardrails, which is quite configurable and flexible. And of course, all the different sort of agentic frameworks have something with guardrails. So guardrails can take many different shapes. One paper that I found really interesting, is not very recent, is a paper, No Free Lunch with Guardrails. And if you're interested in more technical details, check out this ACL tutorial about guardrails. But basically this paper, No Free Lunch with Guardrails, does actual measurements over a wide range of benchmarks. And well, there's two things to know here. If you can see the numbers from the back of the room, probably a bit hard, but well, the numbers are not 100%. That's, I think, sort of the moral of the story. Actually, some of the numbers are quite low, like 70% or 85%. So yeah, guardrails are not all they are imagined to be. And in the latency column here, you see that particular approaches where LLMs are actually used to do the guardrailing, they add maybe multiple seconds to the whole round trip time. So certainly not the kind of silver bullet that guardrails are proclaimed to be.
Yeah, and closing off, we obviously love open source, and IBM released their latest generation of the Granite language models. And I think it's quite interesting that they chose to go with a hybrid model. So it's a transformer slash Mamba style model that I think also very interestingly, they claim is the first to be ISO certified for.
Yeah, so apparently the ISO certification is catching on. So check out the Granite model by IBM. And of course, we cannot leave here without mentioning the new version of DeepSeek.
Yeah, so it's an incremental version that just uses a smarter and more efficient attention mechanism that they now can slash their API cost by half. And also, I wanted to shout out the GLM 4.6 by Jipu AI, which in my view is starting to become the main front runner and big open model from China.
Cool. Yeah, and then we have, for those of you who are heading into the weekend already, a weekend read, which is not about safety, but it's a cool paper about RAG called ReefRAG.
Yeah, so this is picking up steam online, and it's a paper from the Meta Superintelligence Labs. And they just found a way to compress basically the context. So instead of retrieving documents and tokenizing them, you just retrieve the documents and feed a chunk representation altogether to the language model, which can then choose to unpack it with an RL policy. And they show against a relatively weak baseline. So this is against the Llama 2 baseline, which doesn't have that much context, but it seems to match or beat the performance in a bunch of tasks.
Interesting set of concepts. So that leaves us at the end of the show. So if you are looking for an enterprise AI foundation layer, make sure to check out Zeta Alpha, our company. And you can also meet us in the near future at both the Gartner IT Symposium, of course, the Bulwark event of CIOs and enterprise IT folks, and also in a more specialized setting at Chem AI in Amsterdam, where the intersection of AI and chemistry is explored. And that's it for this episode of Trends in AI. As always, we end the show with saying, enjoy discovery.
And thanks for joining us. See you next time.